one of the big technology tweaks that will help your blog so much comes with being able to understand tracking. And one of the best tools out there for tracking, things when it comes to your blog is Google Analytics. And I am super excited because we have a guest with us tonight. We have Pierre DeBois. Pierre, are you there?
Yes. Hi, Tai. Hi, everybody.
Hey, I'm so excited to have you here. I met Pierre when he was a guest on Small Biz Chat. He has some fantastic insights that he shared with that group, and I thought it would be fantastic to bring him online with us. Now, Pierre has, a wealth of experience with Google Analytics and just analytics, period, taking a look at data behind what's happening at your site and helping you interpret that data so you can make some really good decisions about what to do to make it more attractive to, search engines and more, build your traffic with your blog. He's been doing this. He started his consultancy in 2009, so he's been doing this for, quite a while, over 4 years, and even before that, he's had an impressive background, in corporate America at companies like, Ford Motor Company, and he's just got a really, really good grip on analytics. And so I asked him originally to write a blog post, and I thought it would be great to actually have him on the call with us. So you guys get a treat. You guys get an actual post that lists 10 things you want to take a look at when it comes to tracking Google Analytics on your blog. But we also have him live, and we're going to go through 5 questions, live on the call, and then we're going to also open it up if anyone else has a question that you want to bring to the table and ask Pierre about Google Analytics. So, Pierre, anything else you want to add about your background before we go into the question?
You pretty much covered a lot of good points to it. No, I'm just here to just dig in, so we can just get started.
All right. So the first question, and we're going to start with the basics. So exactly what is Google Analytics?
Google Analytics basically is a JavaScript code. And a little bit of history of it started with a company called Urchin that actually developed the script itself. What Google Analytics basically does is that it looks at the sessions that come into play when someone is coming to your website or your blog and using the cookies. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of cookies before, but basically it's a small text file. It gives an idea of a kind of not so much a rough estimate, a pretty accurate estimate of how many visitors are coming to your site, how long are they spending time on that site, and it does it in terms of an aggregate. A lot of times when people say tracking, I mean, it does track, but a lot of times it's the tracking that's done in an aggregate. The benefit from Google Analytics that you have is a lot of people think, well, why do I want to track? Why is it so important? It kind of gives you some ideas on what you can do to improve your site, basically. If you set certain goals for your site and you're trying to have people either come register for a cause, if you're running a nonprofit, if you're trying to have them come buy a book on your blog, if you're trying to have them come and look at previews of clothing and then have them actually have that visitor actually come to your store, what Google Analytics allows you to do is to understand what areas that, when someone comes onto the site, what's attracting them in general, based off of what content you have on the site. And then from there, it allows you to kind of make some decisions to help you understand if you really need to just tweak a site just a little bit more, tweak the content a little bit differently, maybe add something that someone has not, that someone's looking for that they're not finding. It guides you in your web design such that you're not spending a lot of time on things that may not necessarily give you a benefit. And it's particularly powerful when you link Google Analytics with your marketing. You'll find that a lot of companies, from Target to maybe a mid-sized company, will use analytics basically to help guide a marketing campaign. And these are campaigns that are also available to you as a small business owner or in a small organization. So it allows you to basically go in and really understand what tweaks to make on your website, and also understand what sort of marketing is effective that's actually bringing people to your site and allowing them to do whatever objective that you've set for that site.
Now, as I understand it, too, it also lets you do a little bit of troubleshooting. So there was someone I was speaking to, and they used their analytics data to figure out that people were actually going to their shopping cart page, but they weren't buying anything. And
yeah.
that kind of triggered, say, hey, well, what's happening? And it turned out there was something that was broken between, going to the shopping cart and actually clicking the button to buy, right?
Yeah. Yes, that's a very good, Ty. That's a very good example. Definitely a very good example because it again, you may set up your website thinking that you're expecting that each and every time somebody comes to the site that they may be making a purchase, but the data can also show you where people are dropping out. There's a feature on Google Analytics called funnel analysis, which basically, and it has different names than other tools. I know Yahoo Web Analytics calls it a scenario, but the basic function of it is to show it's kind of a clickstream analysis, basically showing where people are coming onto the site and where, just like a leaky pipe, where the traffic may be leaving or exiting from that site. And yours is a very good example of that leak, that idea that someone is coming to the site thinking that there's a purchase going on, but it's not happening the way that you expected.
Yeah, I think that kind of information is really helpful, especially knowing, where people are coming from, where they're dropping off your site. You might want to change something on that page, And in the article, one of the things that I thought was funny, the first question that was in the article was that, your stat counter is not analytics. And I hear people say that all the time. I've got 465 people that came to my site, and they think that that's tracking,
Yeah. And it's not a very helpful. It's kind of a legacy. Real short history. It was the word hit is a reference to a web page, but it's referencing all the elements that makes up a page. So it could be a logo that you have, it could be a picture that you have, as well as a segment of text. So you can have like a number of hits, which is what Stat Counter kind of pretty much covers, but it may not necessarily show a unique page, or it doesn't necessarily show, it doesn't break it down in such a way where you can kind of get an idea of how many people are really looking at that page. It kind of distorts the number. And it's a legacy of some older analytic tools where it was log-based. Today, most of the tools that you see, whether it's Google Analytics, Clicky, Woopra, all of them use some form of JavaScript to tag each page, so that when as the page is loaded, it counts as a visit and it records that information.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you mentioned a couple of those other tools, because I think when I think of Google Analytics, I think of Google, but I didn't even realize that Yahoo has, the same kind of thing, and I'm sure there's some other tools as well. So I'm going to skip a question and come back to the how often question, but I think the meat of this is in this question about, what stats should I pay attention to? I heard you mention something about a funnel analysis, but what are some of the stats that I really need to pay attention to as a blogger if I'm trying to figure out the best things to do to get more traffic to my site?
I think this is a very good question too, because a lot of times, and you had a very good lead in too, by the way, with the hits, because a lot of times people think it's just the number of visits and that's it. What you want to think about as a blogger, and keep in mind it may vary a little bit based off of what your purpose is, but you have a number of tools within analytics. One of the things you may want to look at is in terms of content. On the content reporting, you have average time on site and page views, and even unique page views. Those two combinations, if you look at each page within your blog or maybe each page, can kind of give you an idea of it kind of gives you an idea of if someone's coming to that page, if they're really spending some time on the content. So if you have one segment that deals with let's say if it's on automobiles, for example, and you have one segment that's dedicated to Ford, you can have one segment versus one page for Ford, one page versus for Chrysler. You can have you can use kind of the average time on site and unique page views and see if there's a trend month in, month out. Keep in mind there's going to be one little asterisk to this too with blogs. It gives you some idea, but in some cases with blogs, depending upon how the content is laid out, you still may have a little bit of guessing in terms of which specific content works. Let me give you a quick example. On a web page, and I'll give you like for Zimana, there could be like one page dedicated for the product and service, and then maybe another page dedicated for background, and that kind of gives you a very clear idea, based off of time on site, unique page views, if someone's interested on a background versus the services. On a blog, it may be a little trickier because on one page you can have 2 or 3 articles. So one thing you may want to keep in mind is that you can use content to give you an idea. You may want to keep in mind how that website is laid out and functions, because sometimes it may give you may give you a little bit of a guess as to what really triggered the read. But having them grouped together in some logic will help you a little bit and make that a lot easier. So average time on site, page views. Another you want to look at is maybe exits as well, in terms of are people exiting off of the site based off of that page. And that's another way of kind of getting some ideas if that page is getting a leak. The one that I particularly like getting into referral sources, or more particularly getting into the search. A lot of times when you're doing a blog, you always hear about how a blog can help your SEO if it's because as you write more, as you add more content, it's drawing more and more people to the site. Well, then the next logical question is, well, which keywords are really working for me? Which words are really drawing those people to the site? You can look at the keywords and look at, again, how much time on site that certain keywords or phrases may be drawing people in. The reason why you want to look at that is that it may give you some clues or ideas on whether or not if there's groups of keywords which are drawing people to your site, and it may give you some ideas of what your next article could be or your next subject could be. Because you can have or the other thing is, in some cases, I've done analysis for clients where I've looked and said, okay, here's some keywords that work, but here's some ideas. It's clear that based off of what your logic is in the blog and what it was purposed for, you're missing some important areas that might draw some additional traffic. So one of the things you want to look at is keywords and looking at content and getting some idea of if there's something from there that will help you. Another point I would bring up, and actually I'm going to hold this one point until we get to the fourth question, basically. But the last one I would bring up is particularly if you're trying to do a blog for a region. Let's say if you were interested in New York hip hop or Midwest fashion, you may want to look at the map overlay and see if there may be some combinations there. Are you getting the traffic that you expect to get? Again, if you're doing New York, that means that you may be getting some traffic from New Jersey, from Connecticut. You may want to take a look and see if there are some if there's some people from a region that are coming to your site the way that you expected, and if that's something you may want to look at. And if not, that may be something that can say, hey, maybe we want to do some more social media with hashtags that are specific to New York, or maybe some pay-per-click ads that might allow people to know a little bit more about my blog if there's a particular region to it. So these are just some very general ideas, and what I would look for is just a general trend if possible. If you're looking at people spending a longer time on your pages, does it make sense at the time that they're spending on that particular page or that content? When you start playing with these are probably some very low-flying fruit ideas that will kind of help you get into analytics a little bit more than just visits.
This is fantastic. It's really helpful. I think especially that map overlay, if you are a local business and you're not seeing people from your local area kind of tap into your blog, then that's a perfect segue to start looking at, you said, pay-per-click ads or even Facebook ads that are targeted, to your geography. And there's something else that you mentioned about the pages, when you have a blog. Because if you have that front blog page where you've got a couple of different articles, that will make it fuzzy if you're trying to figure out, what people are actually hitting. But that kind of makes me think that you want to make sure that you're doing the summaries on that blog page instead of putting the whole article there. Because if they're doing the summary and they click from that page to get to the actual blog post, then you can actually see that, oh, they're clicking for that blog post, and it's not just reading the 5 articles on the front page and that's it.
Yeah, and there's something I know for WordPress too. You can also make some adjustments on, depending upon some of the templates. You can make adjustments on categories as well, and that might help you later on when you want to go back and sort. I know one client of mine. We've for example, if you wanted to look in terms of dates, or because sometimes what happens is over time you may have an older piece of material that actually is just bringing people to your site, no matter what you write. It's that one page. I can remember one client that had like a marketing plan, and it was like a 4-year-old post that was driving people to the site, no matter what was being written. It was like the number. It was always in the number. If it wasn't in the number 1 spot, it was at least in the number 2 or 3. So you can kind of use dates to kind of go back and say, hey, what was the based on a post in April or March, which ones really had drawn people into the site. You can play with the categories a little bit just to make it easier for you. The real trick is just really having an understanding of what you expect to just go in, think about what you expect to see for your blog, and see if what you're seeing is making some sense. And that will kind of start dictating to you where to focus and what to add or what to enhance.
And that falls, right in line with my whole premise of social media in general, is that you really have to have a good plan. So are you expecting to see more hits to your services page? Then that's where you need to focus on figuring out how to drive traffic there. Or like you said, if you're in a, geography, is there a geography that you're trying to target? If you want to see those numbers go up, then you tailor all of your social media, like you mentioned, hashtags or, pay-per-click ads. You target that, towards that goal that you have. And for me, it always goes back to the planning. So, I joked about this, in taking a look at the article, with the question of, how often should you check Google Analytics? And I joked about it being kind of like weight loss. You can't go on a diet and look at the scale every day. You're trying to be crazy, right? Because you're like, did I lose a half a pound? Did I lose a quarter pound? So I think sometimes people get the same way with their analytics. They're in there checking every day, or they're checking every 4 hours. I mean, what is really the right framework when you're, how often you should check your analytics reporting?
Here's why I tell small businesses in particular, because I think for small businesses, I think there's a very unique challenge. Usually the check is driven by how much marketing you're doing. So let's say that you have a blog and you're doing maybe some pay-per-click, you're tweeting like mad, you're doing crazy tweets trying to get people to come to your site. You have offline marketing that you're doing. You're passing out flyers maybe in your neighborhood to let people know, hey, come take a look at my site. There's a number. The more marketing that you're doing means that you probably may want to check a little more frequently. The one thing I tell people is that, let's say that if you are super busy, which is probably about at least 90% of small business owners who are super busy and just really can't check in on their analytics. Well, the thing I recommend is think of it as a quarter system. You've gone 3 months. You may have to you have to sit down, think about what taxes you may owe in the quarter. It may be a good time to think about what has been done. Just go through, really hammer it in and use the blog and post and write and do everything you want. Don't think about the numbers so much. Then sit down at the end of that quarter and take a really good look at what's going on and take a look at what drove traffic for you. A really good example for blogs, I would say, is referrals. You have referral sources. Many times with bloggers, you get people that partner up. You have somebody who may be referring traffic for you. Look at the end of the quarter. See how many times that referral source has sent traffic for you. If it's pretty steady, that means that you have a pretty viable partnership that you may want to hang on to. And even if it's something where you may not be paid for writing, for example, for that post, but that traffic may be leading people into your site, and that's very valuable if it's steady. So I would say at least, the short answer to it would be, your marketing, the more that you're spending in your marketing, the more you really want to check. But if you are kind of at a point where you really are super busy, at least at 3 months, I definitely don't try to do it day by day. I don't think that's really giving you a much of anything to say, yes, it's up, no, it's down, yes, it's sideways. But at a 3-month interval, definitely take a look at what you're doing and just kind of get an idea of, does it make sense, and you may get some new ideas of what you want to write or add.
That's really good information. I like that at the end of the quarter. And so you can kind of plan for it in advance, and you don't have to worry about it. But if you are doing that strategic marketing, it does make sense to check it, more frequently to see what's going on. So I think that's really, really a good way to think about it there.
Yeah.
So let me ask, one of the things you mentioned were referrals, and I understand that because, when I go in and look at my statistics, one of the top referrers for me is LinkedIn. So people are coming from LinkedIn and, coming, from whatever I post out there in those groups. That's one of the drivers to my site, and I get to see that. And I also know from taking a look at search, especially for the career makeover coach site that I have, a lot of times the biggest referrer there is career change or career transition. That's what people are searching for, and that's how they're, finding, my site is coming up in that search. But you talked a little bit about taking a look at the internal search and figuring out, if there's something that's happening internally on your site and making that your next blog post, when it comes to keywords. What are some search tools that I should be using on my blog so that I can get that kind of information?
Google offers and I probably will have to circle back and get a link for for the class for sure. But Google offers a version of the search engine that you can embed into a website. If you have and the purpose of this, there's a kind of practical purpose for this. If you have a number of items that you're selling, let's say you have a blog and you have an e-commerce built into it, and you are selling all sorts of candles. Let's say it's a store for knickknacks, candles, cards, all sorts of items. You want some sort of internal search in that site, so that way, when people are looking for something, and if you happen to not have it, Google Analytics can actually track that reporting and see if that search ended up with someone actually finding the item or that person actually deciding to say, hey, I need to take myself elsewhere. And that's very useful information. Google has it's available, and there are some independent search engines out there that can also be used as well. But I would say if you Google has a very simple one you can go with. That I think that will be sufficient for what you're trying to do. And the nice thing about it is that it integrates well with Google Analytics. So there you go.
Well, that's good because I often see blog themes that have that internal search, and when you look at the backside of it, it will say, do you want to use, WordPress search, or do you want to, add another kind of search? And so your recommendation would not be to use the standard WordPress search, but to use the Google search.
I would say that Google has one that would integrate very well, and I probably have to check a couple others as well. But I know Google integrates very easily, so it makes it very straightforward.
Mm-hmm. I know another one that I've used is Legit. I think it's LIJIT or GIT. Mm-hmm. They have some of the same kind of tracking and tools as Google, but they're not as extensive as Google, and it doesn't necessarily hook into the Google Analytics. So, here's the last question, that I have is, when you're building your blog and you're trying to stand out in your industry or niche, how do I compare what's happening at my blog, to what's happening with other, blogs, of your peers or, other people in your industry? How do I compare those to see what's going on?
Well, there's a couple of tools out there you can use, and Google has one of their own, but there is a little bit of an asterisk to that. So I'll share what's going on. Google, first of all, there is a benchmark within Google Analytics that does for average time on site. It does for visits. It's pretty much the standard 6 metrics you would see in the dashboard. Now, the asterisk is that the data that goes into that benchmark is really based on other Google users participating. And there may be, in some instances, it's not always true, but in some instances, depending on what you're trying to do, it may not quite give you, you may be looking at data that, let's just say, that doesn't have enough statistical sample. So like if your blog is based on chamber music, you may not have that many people with chamber music who are participating in the benchmarking for Google Analytics. But there are other tools that you can kind of make another comparison to that you can kind of use as well. The two favorites I have, my personal favorites are Compete and QuantCast. And let me tell you about both. Both of these are what are called panel analytics. If you've heard of Alexa, they're kind of like this. That's also another panel analytics as well. And what they do is that they infer some demographic and psychographic information about visitors that come to a site, and you can kind of make a comparison. So, for example, Compete, you can type in the URL. Let's stick with a chamber music example. Let's say that you know that Samantha's chamber music blog is the largest blog of chamber music in North America. Well, you can type in Samantha into Compete and get an idea of the number of visitors that come to her site. The pro version, which I believe is $199 a month, if I remember correctly, gets a little bit more advanced and a little bit more detailed into age groups. So you can get an idea of the average age of the visitors that are coming into that site. You can get the, if I remember correctly, I think it has its own map overlay as well. There's some more detail that you can get into for Compete. QuantCast has the same type of setup, but it adds a different type of twist to it. It adds what's called an affinity chart to the side, and that chart gives you an idea of the likelihood of where that visitor would go beyond Samantha's site. So let's keep with the Samantha example here. So let's say you go to QuantCast and type in Samantha's chamber music in the QuantCast. Well, in the affinity chart, it may show Time.com for Time Magazine. It may show the Lincoln Center. If the Lincoln Center has a website, it may show Taj Mahal for blues, maybe possibly. It's maybe some sort of anomaly. But what it does is that it shows a number of sites where the likelihood that the visitor will come from Samantha's chamber to Time Magazine or one of those other sites that I mentioned in the affinity. And the benefit to you is that it gives you an idea of where people are going in general as an aggregate. It kind of gives you an idea of how to tailor your content if you're writing a blog. It may also give you some ideas in terms of partnerships, if you're looking for people to partner with, or even in terms of advertising. A lot of times advertisers use that information to kind of help gain an idea of which blogs they approach when they want to post an ad or some sort of campaign on that site. So, in short, if you want to make comparisons, you have Compete and QuantCast. Alexa does some of the same things, although I've heard some different things on Alexa in the past in terms of the data that some people kind of debate about that might be a little bit too TMI for the audience. But I would say QuantCast or Compete gives you some good competitive information that would be helpful.
Well, that's fantastic. I really want to thank you for answering our questions. I've gotten a lot of information. If there's anybody online that has a question, I'll give you a chance to ask in just 1 minute because we're almost out of time. We've just had such a wealth of information at TaiGoodwin.com/checklist. When you subscribe to the newsletter, I will be making Pierre's offer available to subscribers because he's been very gracious about that, and I think it's a fantastic deal if you really want to dig in and get a little bit more information about how to make your site, really start sizzling when it comes to getting traffic, which is the main point of being online, right? You want more traffic, you want more visibility, and ultimately you want more customers. So let me see if you have any questions, and you're on mute right now. You can do *6 to mute. *6 to unmute yourself if you have any questions. There was a question that came in earlier via email from someone who couldn't be here, and they had a question about this is on the back end, and so the question is, how do I give other people access to my Google reporting without giving them my Gmail?
Okay. That's a very good question. In Google Analytics, under settings, you do have a manager that allows you to add an admin or manager. In fact, this is one of the best features in Google Analytics. And a lot of my clients, what they'll do is I'll tell them to add my email to the manager. So there's a manager setting that will allow you to add the emails in there. It's basically if you go under profiles, if you go under edit, I'm actually going to click through here just to make sure. Under profile settings, if you scroll down, there's a user access at the bottom, and you can set the person as a user or an administrator. It just depends upon what the use is. The major difference is that there's some I know there's some settings that under, just to kind of keep it short, that under administrator under user that I couldn't do. Like if it's a custom setting, that's something that I can't do as a user. It's pretty much looking at the data. But if you want them to go in and do something in terms of custom variables, goal setting, if I remember correctly, I think it also comes under administrator. I'm not 100%. Something that gets a little bit more into some of the editing on settings, you do want to give them the administrator setting in there. So I hope I answered that question for you. And thank you. That's a good question.
Yeah, that was a question I had like I said, came in earlier. And I've actually gotten that question from a few other people before, so thank you for that. We're actually out of time. There were no other questions that came in on the chat, and Pierre, you've done a fantastic job, and your article that you have for us has an additional 5 questions, so we've got more information there, and I know you're going to send over some other things. So if you're listening to this recording later, please make sure you go to the site for week 4. There are going to be some fantastic things for you there to help you think all this through. I know it's a lot. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, but I want to say thank you again to Pierre DeBois of Zimana, and let me spell that out. It's www.zimana.com. Did I get that right, Pierre?
Yes, you did. And Tai, if I can also add, this has been a pleasure, and I want to say thank you. I know you've gushed about me quite a bit, but I really say thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to the group, and I hope this is helpful. And everyone, feel free to give a call or send an email, and I'll do what I can to give you as much information as I can.
Well, thank you again, and thanks to everybody, whether you're listening live or listening later. As always, I'm going to sign off by encouraging you to stay brilliant. Good night, everybody.
Good night.